Okay, welcome to Changes. This Hangout on Air is run by me, Sally Ember, Ed.D, and it has been running since last August 2014. This is episode 33 of Changes, Conversations Between Authors, a video cast that is live today, June 10th, 2015, on Google Plus, Hangouts on Air, and YouTube. And I am so pleased this week to welcome my guest, Stuart Aken, hailing all the way from Southern England. Say hi to everybody, Stuart.
Hello, everybody. Glad you could join us.
What would you like to tell us about yourself?
Okay. I'm extremely ancient in writing since I could hold a pen. I always loved reading to the extent that I exhausted the children's library found by the age of and had to ask rather fiercely if I could borrow books from the adult section. She said I could, but I had to ask for her for perusal and authority. The fact that she could take out all quiet front, my first book, says an awful lot about perusal of the books. But yes, I've written and read most of my life, and but never full until I retired a couple of years ago, and then I'm now have theoretically the free time full time.
So you wrote a lot of things that you didn't publish or try to publish until about 2 or 3 years ago?
Oh no, I've published. My first published work was actually illustrated photographic articles. I sold to the photographic press when I was 19, and I had a radio play broadcast on national radio in 74.
You are ancient.
Oh, positively ancient. Yeah.
I mean, I'm almost as ancient as you, but in those years, I was still in school.
Yeah.
Most college, still.
Sorry, I missed that.
All right. So I'm interested in having you talk about what we were talking about offline a few minutes ago, which was the way that you came into writing so many different kinds of fiction, where some people will just pick one or two genres, like mystery and horror or fantasy and mystery, and you're like into 6 or 7 of them. So what, you couldn't make up your mind? You got a lot of different personalities? What happened here?
Yeah, possibly multiple personality syndrome. I don't know. I think basically what happens with me is that the story uses the genre, and often it's not a particular genre, so it spreads over into other areas. I started off writing my first published novel as a romance, and it turned into a romantic thriller because of what happened. So I always start my writing by developing a character. I don't have a plot. Never plotted in my life. That's not true. I tried one. Wrote 78,000 words by hand, lined paper. It was a thriller, and threw it in the bin.
You threw it in the bin, and in America that means you put it in recycling.
I threw it away.
Well, David Leopold, who's going to be my guest in 2 weeks, is visiting. He's taking a break from publishing his video book by listening to us. So we're not going to tell on him, okay?
Okay. He's allowed.
You threw your first novel away. Did you ever go retrieve it and use pieces of it? Because I've heard of people doing that.
No, not that particular one. No. It didn't grab me. So.
Wow. So let me say what I think about that, because I don't know if I could do that. I have kept, I'm sorry to say, I'm not a hoarder of anything else, but I have kept everything I've ever written except one major error that I made in my life. I, at one point, had a fit and threw away all my journals except for 2, which was a huge mistake. I can't even think of what I was thinking at that point. But one of the things I was thinking was I had a pre-adolescent son, and I was very unhealthy at that time. I was actually quite sick. And I thought, what if I die? I don't want him reading these. This would be like mind scarring for him to read some of these things at that age. And I was worried, and I couldn't trust anyone to make sure that he wasn't going to read them. So I threw them all away. I just got rid of them all. And then years later, when I started doing much more writing and wanted to mine my life for ideas and remembering my life, I was like, why can't I remember this? Or what happened then? Where is that? And then I realized I threw it away.
And the problem is that once you've committed it to writing, you have the excuse not to remember it anymore. So it makes it even more difficult to remember things from the past.
I think that's true. I think we get lazier once we've written it down. It's like we've stored it and we can forget about it or something.
That's right. That's right. I have a theory about old age and memory. I don't think your memory is worse as you get old. I think you've just got far more things to remember. That's my excuse anyway.
Well, I think that's true, and I think that it's also true that our memories get, like the way computers get fragmented, our memories can get fragmented, and we don't have a defragger.
No, that's right. That's right. I think some people try to do that by doing these wonderful detox things. I don't think it works.
Well, I appreciate what you said about being character driven or being driven by the intermediate part rather than the big plot, because I think for me, I've written a lot of things based on a little kernel of a person or a little kernel of a conflict or a little kernel of an anecdote, and then it would just go from there. And I didn't necessarily have it all planned out either. But generally speaking, until I started this series, I wrote realistic fiction. And then I decided to write this series, not so much a decision, actually. It kind of just came to me as a story about this woman who is a lot like I am, but not me, who is visited by holographic aliens in her bedroom in 2012. And that has to do with their recognizing that Earth is in trouble and needs help. And these groups of aliens and their counterparts in the Many Worlds Collective have been visiting us for millennia, more or less secretly, and only coming to certain individuals and being known but not allowed to be publicized. And now we're going to be able to publicize it, is the idea. But what was really going on for me when I was writing these books, and is still going on, is I'm trying to deal with an unrequited love in my actual life. And so I'm writing all these different versions of this main character's story to see all the different ways this might go, none of which is happening in my life. So it's all wish fulfillment, right? And the aliens are just sort of extra.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I realized, oh, but I have all these philosophies and I have all of these wishes for Earth. I'm going to put that in there too. And that's what I think you and I have something in common.
You see, I think that's one of the beauties, one of the joys of being a writer, is that you can live vicariously through your characters.
And then we can right all these wrongs and fix everything that's societally ill.
Yeah, yeah. Makes us feel good.
So is the work that you're doing in your fantasies and science fiction, is that rectifying societal ills?
That is part of the message, I would say. But I try to make my stories first. I think it's so difficult. Sorry, it's so easy to proselytize. And the last thing I want to do is become a preacher to my readers. I want them to enjoy the story first. If they get the subliminal message, that's great. But that's not the purpose of the writing. The purpose of the writing is to entertain, to make people feel.
I think the entertainment factor sometimes is much more diverse than we might imagine. So, for example, it doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be romantic. It doesn't have to be any particular kind of thrill. It can be intriguing. It can be mind-provoking, thought-provoking. It can be something that really makes us sit back and think, wait a minute, you know, like really take us aback. So are you doing more of that?
If we can engage both the mind and the emotion of the reader, I think we've gained something there. I think we've got partway to our ambition. That's certainly what I tried to do.
So what about your series, your fantasy series called the Seared Sky trilogy? What about that is fixing society?
Right.
What are you, first of all, what are you exposing as problematic?
Well, the basic theme of the trilogy is the room for conflict, which is caused by organized religion. Now that sounds fairly heavy, but in fact, the way in which the story progresses is it follows three couples, three romantic couples, on their various journeys. Their journeys interweave with each other. But they're
into what? I couldn't hear you. Into what?
They interweave with each other.
Interweaved, okay.
But the antagonist is a common antagonist to all three couples, even though they come from different societies in different parts of the world. So the antagonist is the one that represents a particular type of extreme religious belief. So that's how I've got over that part of that theme. But I try not to let it get in the way of telling the story. To go back over to what we talked before about character, when I first started to write the first book, I don't do a lot, but I had a very, very loose scaffold on which I can hang the flesh, the skeleton on which I can hang the flesh. And one of the characters that I'd first written was very, very minor character. In fact, he was the son of this antagonist. And as the book progressed, he became a very important character just because of the way he responded, through my writing. So my characters sort of lead me through the story, and that's what happened.
Wow. So is any of these characters in particular more or less someone that you would feel is like you, or are they all very different from you?
The terrifying thing is that they're all like me, but they're very disparate characters. I mean, there are some very good people and some very evil people, and every shade in between. But that's,
and you really feel a part of you is embodied in each of them?
I don't think it's possible to write a character without that being the case. I think you have to have some empathetic link.
Well, that says a lot about people that write about sociopaths and psychopaths, then, eh?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm staying away from those authors. They're not coming on my show.
It's the difference, though, isn't it, between thinking about it and doing it.
I don't know. In Buddhism, we say there's not much difference, really. Obviously, there's more externalized harm if you actually carry it out into your behavior.
Exactly.
But the harm starts in the mind. The intention, the motivation is where the harm starts.
But we're writers, so we operate on the imaginative level. So
one would hope.
Our basis is the what if. That's a fundamental level of operation is from the what if. And we have the imagination to be able to express that what if. But it doesn't mean that we necessarily believe in it or want to do it.
All right, that's fair. That's fair enough. Well, so what I mentioned earlier that I also wanted to talk about is how we show the imagery for our books, usually on our book covers, or as you have behind you in a map, and how all that comes about. So which one do you want to speak to first?
Well, we've talked about a seared sky, and the map relates to a seared sky. In fact, after I'd done the characterization, which I wrote the first sort of 50 or 60 character histories first. The next thing I did was compose this map, and I felt that a lot of fantasy maps in a lot of fantasy novels are unrealistic. You have rivers that are going uphill. You have mountain chains. You have no basic geological facts. So what I wanted to do was produce a map which was interesting and had loads of variety in it, but which was realistic. So I drew this behind me on a sheet of what was originally white sugar paper with ink, knowing that over time it would fade and like parchment. And I then folded it. It looks like an old piece of parchment, which is what it's referred to in the book. My publisher, when looking for designs for the covers of the book, he was so impressed with the map that he introduced it to the cover designer, then used it as a background for the covers.
Yeah. Well, I think when you're world building, it really does help the readers to get a little bit more of a visual.
Oh, I think it's essential, yeah.
And especially if you're talking about traveling across distances in your stories, or characters that are going on some kind of a quest and encountering certain obstacles along the way, the reader wants to be able to trace that journey and almost go with them, you know, and see where they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think most fantasy are picaresque. They involve a quest, and if you don't give some sort of guide, visual sense, it's very difficult for them to imagine where they are in relation to other events that are occurring.
Yep. And so then we get to the book covers, and I'm gonna speak about one of my pet peeves, which only affects one of your book covers, but affects billions of others, which is putting body parts on book covers. I don't like it. I don't care what the body part is. If it's an eyeball, arms, legs, a bare chest, one hand, I don't get it. I don't understand. Why do people do that?
I suspect in many cases it's to do with I think many of the books you're talking about are erotic literature, and it's done there to attract that particular readership. You know, we are very visual after all. We experience the world more through our eyes than any other sense. So I suspect that's where that comes from in many cases. But we are human. We recognise parts of the human body in ways. They have certain symbolic. What's the word I'm looking for? God, I don't know.
Value, importance, meaning.
Yeah. So you're talking about, for instance, the eye. I mean, we all consider the eye to be a window to the soul. So perhaps that's a reason for using it on a book cover. One of my book covers has a picture of the Yorkshire Dale, which is the place in which it is set. The place itself is almost like a character in the book, but overlaid over that, a pair of women's legs, very glamorous. And that's because the main character of the story, the male character, is a glamour photographer. That's what he does.
Oh, now see, so that means that actually has some pertinence to your story.
Yeah.
Well, see, I don't mind that. That doesn't peeve me. It's like you've got this woman or this man on the cover, and for some reason they're half undressed. Now, if it is an erotic novel or it has a lot of romance in it, okay. But sometimes it's an adventure novel or a sci-fi novel, or you know, it really isn't overtly romantic or sexual, and yet these people are still half undressed. And I'm not a modest person. I'm not a prude, but I just don't understand, like, why would the author or the publisher or whoever is in charge of that decision want that to be the image people associate with a story that doesn't really have anything to do with the story? Why can't these people keep their clothes on? You know, they're in a cold climate, and the woman's wearing like a bikini, and the guy doesn't even wear a coat, much less a shirt. It's just like, I don't get it.
Commercialism. Sex sells.
It's true. Well, speaking of commercialism, so you became an indie publisher, but you actually have, an indie writer, but you actually have a publisher for all your books, or just some of them?
No, only for the most recent ones.
Okay. And you did the other ones yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. How have you liked that? Tell me about both experiences.
Yeah, my latest book also, the one on which I've just written about my 10 years of chronic fatigue. That's also self-published. There's very good reason for that. 50% of the royalties will go to a charity, and it would have been too complex to do it through a publisher. So I decided I would solve that one.
And that's about chronic fatigue syndrome, which has a different name, Epstein-Barr virus. Is that still what they're calling it, or no?
It's had about 53 different names. It's known mostly as ME/CFS is the sort of the common label for it, but it has lots of other labels.
Okay.
I mean, it was always known as yuppie flu in this country for a while. A fairly insulting term. But yeah, so to go back to publishing and self-publishing, I'd sent several novels off to publishers, and they'd come back often with quite a lot of praise, but saying that they were commercially not going to work. And I thought, well, these are stories that I want to tell. And self-publishing was becoming an option at that time. And an organisation in the UK, backed by the Arts Council, government-sponsored organisation, made an offer whereby you could publish a book for, I think it was 88 quid, which was really worthwhile. So I had a novel on the stocks, the one I was just talking about, in the Dales, Breaking Faith. And I self-published that one, and went on from there and did quite a few e-books. The great thing about self-publishing, I think, is that you have freedom. You don't have an editor who is employed by pointing the finger at you can't do that, you've got to do this. Or you can't write in that genre, you've got to write in this genre because that was the genre you wrote and we were successful in. I'm not interested in restrictions. When it came to actually having a publisher, what actually happened was one of my friends introduced me to a small local club, and we had a and he asked me if I would do a short story for an anthology of science fiction he was doing. It was an anthology of winners of a competition that he'd run. He wanted me to do it as a professional writer. So I did him a story for that. And from that point, his approach to me, if you write anything long, let me see it. And knowing how difficult it is to get a very lengthy fantasy trilogy, I took a chance. And it's a fantastic experience working with Dan Grove. He runs fantastic publishing. What's
the name of it again? Mangrove?
Say again?
Is the name of it Mangrove, like the tree?
No, Dan Grove.
Oh, okay.
And the publishing company is called Fantastic Books Publishing. And he is one of these people who actually thinks that authors are people worth supporting. So he's a bit more of an old-fashioned publisher in that sense, even though he's a young man. And he gave me complete freedom and consulted me on the covers of the book. And the rest of the stuff he did was all done professionally, the editing, the design of the books. And I've been absolutely delighted with what he's done. So
wow, that's really lucky. You're really lucky, because I've heard such a variety of experiences from authors who have had both publishers with their books and done it themselves. And some of the people who have worked with publishers have had good experiences, but a lot of them, man, that is just nightmare after nightmare that I keep hearing. It's really hard.
Yeah,
to work with some of them.
Yeah, I've heard the same. And in fact, I've got writing colleagues who've had very bad experience with publishers. So I can understand why people choose the freedom of self-publishing.
Well, and I think it's not just the freedom to make decisions or have autonomy or earn the most money from your royalties. Those all matter, of course. But I think you put your finger on it a few minutes ago when you said it's the freedom to move among the genres, write whatever length you want, say it the way you want, not have somebody outside of you, the artist, the creator, trying to manipulate or maneuver whatever it is you're creating to suit them for whatever purpose they have that may or may not be in harmony with your purpose.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
And so I think especially if you have a message book like you do with your chronic fatigue syndrome book, you don't want somebody messing with that.
Well, I wasn't too concerned about it from that point of view, because I think Dan would have published it as I'd written it, but because of the share of the royalty, it would have been very difficult to do it that way.
Right, right. That's true. There's a whole other.
In fact, Dan has a deal with all his authors that 10% of the royalty go to a charity. So that's the case with all his books.
Wow, that's kind of like the Newman zone of publishing. Like Paul Newman does that with all of his food.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, what Dan does with
hearing that.
Is that the rest of the royalties, the rest of the profit that's available, is split equally between the publisher and the author. I don't know of any other publisher who does that sort of generous deal.
Well, but if you think about it, I mean, I don't want to put anybody on the spot or say that he's not doing a good thing, because I'm sure compared to other publishers, he's doing a very good thing. But if you think about it, I don't understand why publishers think they should get even half. They didn't do most of the work. They didn't take most of the risk, really, other than when they actually publish it. And they wouldn't have anything if it weren't for the writer. And I don't see why the writer doesn't get the lion's share all the time. I don't really like that way that it started, and now it's like become some weird tradition. And I'm so glad that indie publishing and self-publishing have broken that trend, because it never should have happened like that, in my opinion.
I think it happened originally because there was a huge investment in paper books. In order to actually make the process effective, you had to produce en masse. So the publisher had to publishing 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 copies of the book, and maybe only sell two. But that no longer is the case with print on demand, and as you say, with digital. That's the whole process has changed.
Right.
But the publishers don't seem to realise that's the case.
Well, it might not have changed for them, because what they're doing is they're creating a market that does put books in bookstores, not just on demand. And so they still do have to have a sizable print run to get physical books into all these bookstores, if that's what they're doing. And that does make an investment. I agree that that is a little bit of a risk on their part. So they shouldn't have to take all the risk, I guess. But there's just something about how the writers, the authors, the creators aren't given, I think, nearly enough credit.
Absolutely.
For doing what we do in the first place.
Yeah. But don't you think the same happens in the film world? You know, you watch a film which is based on somebody having written something, and who gets the lion's share of the money? The actors who are just presenting the words of the writer.
That's true. That's really true.
Yeah. We're undervalued.
Now, speaking of that, we didn't talk about this earlier, but I'm curious, have you decided, or have you already been putting some of your books into audio format?
Not yet, no.
I've been thinking about that. I would really like to have it happen, but I don't know when or how I'll have it happen. I did a couple of author readings that I put online that I did in public and then recorded them, but I don't really know if there's a market the way that you might think for a long science fiction book like what I'm writing, but maybe there is. If people have long commutes, you know, or they jog or something.
Well, if you consider J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter series, those are all long books. And Stephen Fry narrated every one of them as audiobooks, and they're selling well.
Well, that's a good point. And then people do go on the treadmill or whatever, and they need something to listen to besides Fox News, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So another subject I was interested in is looking into the future, which is what a lot of authors do, whether we're writing actual futuristic science fiction or just writing somewhat realistic fiction or fantasy fiction, world building. And you always have this fork that you have to come to, which is dystopia or utopia, right?
Yeah.
So how do you decide which path to tread? And I obviously picked utopia, and I've talked about this in a lot of my episodes, that I wanted to look into a better world because I'm really tired of everybody making it apocalyptic and disease-ridden and war-mongering futures. But I recognize the validity of that. I know that seems pretty likely. We're already in that. So how did you decide which fork to take?
Right, that's a very good question. As I say, my story suggests the genre, but also, although I'm actually an optimist, the world that I live in strikes me as being one which is going in entirely the wrong direction. And so, in a way, science fiction as a form of warning to society about the consequences of current action. I mean, one of the things in my latest science fiction, my novelette, The Meaningless Train, is about a combination of DNA manipulation and android development, which actually result in the production of robots which become more attractive than real people. Imagine the concept of that. So that's what the story is about.
There's actually a television show that's just starting that has almost that exact same plot.
Yeah, they've obviously pinched it from my book.
I don't think they did. It's called Humans. It's about to start in 3 weeks here in America.
Yeah.
It's on network television somewhere. I haven't seen it yet because it's new, but I've seen the previews. And I think part of their premise is that these robots or androids are becoming too self-aware and too autonomous and not always benevolent.
Yeah.
Of course, Isaac Asimov started all of that with iRobot. Well, he didn't start it, but he's very famous with that, you know. And Philip K. Dick was always warning us about the evils of technology and how it was all going to run amok, right? So.
And the evidence is that it is likely to go in that direction. And so, in a sense, what those of us who are doing this are doing are adding
except I have to tell you a story. No, I have to tell you a story. I've been paying attention to the evolution here of robotics. There was a huge robotics contest this past weekend here in California in the United States of people trying to create robots to do various tasks and competing with who had the best ones. Well, prior to that, there was a lot online showing what robots have gotten up to in the last year or so. And I heard this whole story on NPR, National Public Radio, that was so funny, that had this man talking about how he was trying to train this robot to do one thing, which is fold a towel. And he said that it took, and I'm not kidding you, 7 months with 20 coders or something to get it to even write the code to get this robot to recognize in a basket of laundry the corner of a towel versus a piece of underwear or sock or a shirt, and then to actually be able to fold it was still beyond them. And they finally figured out how to get it to fold it, and it took that robot something like 5 to 7 minutes to pick this towel up and fold it. And then at the same time that this person was telling the story, he said, I also have an 18-month-old at home, he's telling the announcer, and my 18-month-old was learning to fold a towel. And when she learned to do it, it took her 7 seconds to fold the towel.
That's as things are at the present. But the problem is that we have a combination of technologies which are occurring at the same time in parallel. And if you take out things like, if you combine the potential of things like nanotech, graphene, and artificial intelligence, which is currently increasing exponentially. Oh, we've got.
I'll tell you in a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you take those all together, then you have you have the material, you have the recipe, you have the ingredients for a type of artificial intelligence that could potentially become more intelligent than we are. I'm not saying we're there yet, but it's a strong possibility.
Right, right. Well, I think intelligence is definitely the potential, but not the physical manipulation talent. And Vivekananda Bandurao is telling us that he saw the advertisement for the show I was talking about in the UK. That's where he lives. So you should look for it, Stuart. It's called Humans. And they spell one of the letters that looks like the U looking like a V for some weird reason. So you can look for that. And I think that no one is disputing that robots or artificial intelligent computers can be made smarter and more capable than humans. But can they embody that is what we're hearing they can't. They can't still, we humans aren't smart enough to write the code. Now, some of those computers might get good enough at writing the code, right?
The problem is that it isn't what the humans can do. It's what the artificial intelligence itself can do.
Exactly.
Because once it reaches a certain stage, it becomes self-replicating. And at that point, because it has no moral concerns like we do, it reaches the point where it can develop beyond what we envisage. And that's the day-to-day.
Yeah. Some people have been watching, David, Leopold, and Vivekananda are telling me that we're having a terrible echo. And I've been trying to fix it on my end. And did you end up saying that you did or didn't have earbuds? I don't remember asking you if you had earphones or earbuds you could put in.
I did have.
Because if you have some, if you could put them in, it might help. They're hearing this big echo, and I know that it's not usually on my side, even though I don't wear them, because we've done a lot of shows where there was no echo. So you can look for that. And I'm going to talk in the meantime, thanking Vivekananda and David for telling us about that. And David suggested maybe it was because you had multiple windows or browsers open, but I know you don't.
No.
You don't have the earbuds, you can't find them?
I can't find them, and in any case, I don't think they would fit this computer.
Okay. Well, we'll just carry on then, and that's what we're doing. Sorry, everybody, for the echo, but, you know, we're lucky it worked. I had to come in 5 times just to make it work, and we almost crashed twice, so there we are. I think that Google and I are just not good friends today, but we're doing the best we can. One of the things I wanted to ask you about that we talked about earlier was how you make the distinctions among the continuum of love to romance to intimacy to erotica in your stories and in your writing. And obviously people force you to label what you're writing so that people who want to avail themselves of erotica or avoid the erotica are able to do that. But where do you think the lines are?
You see, I think the ideal in any relationship between two loving people is one of love and love. Those two combined make for a perfect relationship. But you have to think in terms of love in a real sense. The problem with our modern society, and possibly this has been the case for quite a while, is that the word love has been valued. Love is so frequently applied to what is entirely a sexual relationship. Now, whilst it's possible to have love without sex, and possible to have sex without love, both are enhanced by each other. That's the way I see it. Now, some people might think I'm an old romantic, but that's fine. I don't mind being that label at all. So for me, there is a natural progression from the love situation into eroticism. What there isn't is a progression into pornography. There's a real difference between those two things. Pornography exploits, erotica celebrates, and that's the way. Yeah. Does that help?
Well, and there was a very, very famous quote from Audre Lorde, who's a very active poet and feminist and writer who passed away at a very young age of cancer about 15 or 20 years ago now. But she talked a lot about the erotic as power. And she talked about the power of the erotic in almost every interpersonal relationship, and that it didn't have to have anything to do with sex, that you can have a teacher-student relationship that has a lot of eroticism that isn't supposed to be acted out into sex, but that in the creativity that we're engaged in, which is a second chakra activity down in the below the belly button area, if you're talking about energy centers of the human body, then you have the residing reproduction center in the same place as the creativity center of energy. And so when you're feeling all of that moving through your body and you're having that urge to create or procreate, those are almost the same thing, but you don't have to act them out in sexual ways. And so she talked a lot about how people need to be more responsible about how we utilize that energy and not to sexualize it so often. She said especially Westerners aren't very good at having that distinction, and that she would celebrate the erotic in a lot of ways and not use it as sexuality. And I'm sure she would be celebrating your definition of pornography versus eroticism as well. So thank you for that. I think that's very interesting.
That's also very interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so we're having that moment now in a few minutes where we're at almost a quarter of the hour. It is hard to believe that we have gotten to that already. And so I'm going to be asking you that question that I ask all of my changes guests, which is, what would you say to speak to this large question in your own particular perspective, which is given all of the local, personal, regional, statewide or provincial, national, global, economic, environmental, climatic, artistic, religious and spiritual, medical and technological and scientific, and any other kinds of changes you're aware of. Which ones arouse in you hope? Which ones evoke fear? And what would you like to speak about today in the area of changes? Take it away, Stuart Aken.
Okay. Have we got 3 or 4 hours? I'll make it as brief as I can. As far as fear is concerned, I'm naturally an optimist, but I'm also very rational and realistic. I look at the world around me, and I see that we are largely governed by the design of big business. Nothing to do with it. It's all to do with how we make a book. Doesn't matter how we make a book. And that worries me because politicians are into that vortex from all parties, and they are equally used by the idea that the most important building block of society is how we make. And that's absolutely, it's just rubbish. Far more important in life, like just equality. We live in a world where 83 individuals have more personal wealth than half of the world's population. That cannot be right. And if you ask a politician, what can't do anything about it. Well, alter the market. That's what they're in. They're in power to make things right. Not to make things right for big business, but to make things right for people who actually are supposed to represent. So what I fear is that we will move into a world which is more and more ruled by corporations who have only the profit motive. That's their prime interest. They have no concern for the common people who they see as consumers, and unfortunately, a large section of the population, particularly in the West, is is blind to this possibility. So that's the thing that I suppose I fear more than anything else. Then if we go on from that to the environment, I have a daughter, she's 22. I fear for her future in the world. She's a nice lass and so on, and she wants a family, but it worries me the sort of world that we are giving to our children. We are using resources as if we live in a place where there are infinite resources available to us, and they're not. They're all finite. We live on a small blue dot on the edge of a galaxy. It's a tiny little place that we live in, and we are using resources at such a rate that in only a very few years' time, certain essentials to our modern life will no longer be available. So that worries me. There's been a great deal of back talk recently about overpopulation, and that it's not the thing that we should be fearing. But the more people there are, the more resources we're going to use. And that's quite simple. I mean, you can't get away from that fact. And the greater the competition there is for those resources, the greater the probability of conflict for those resources. So that obviously worries me and fears me. That's one of the reasons I write dystopian fiction, because I think people need to be made aware of these things. So many people want to live their lives blind to the realities, and it worries me that form of complacency actually allows the extremists to continue with their own particular programs. As far as hope is concerned, we are in a situation where we have great potential. Human beings are incredible creatures. We are inventive, creative, imaginative. We're capable of huge amounts of love and generosity. And so if we can harness those positive qualities, then I think we have a fantastic future available to us. What worries me is that the people who have little imagination other than the bottom line are the ones who are in control, and they have no real interest in changing from the status quo. And it does concern me that so many of the people who have the option, have the opportunity, particularly in the West, this is the case, particularly in the democratic countries, where they have the opportunity to unseat those people who are accountants, basically. And forgive me, I'm not talking about accountants who deal with, you know, the everyday business, but the people who actually make decisions for businesses and commerce. What worries me is that the vast majority of people don't seem to be aware of the dangers that are posed by having these people in charge. And that's the way I actually see the way that we're going. I can't remember, it was a long, complex question you asked me. But I think I've covered the things that really matter, as far as I'm concerned, matter to me anyway, which is what I tend to write. One of the other aspects, I suppose, now I think about it, is all forms of religious extremism. We live in a world where we have to be so careful about what we say about people's beliefs, and it puzzles me that we are so concerned to protect the beliefs of individuals, as if this was somehow more important than the facts. So you have groups of individuals, groups of people who have beliefs which are clearly clearly based on fallacy, based on myth, and they are given more importance than those things which are factually the case, and that worries me. And it worries me that it's becoming more and more difficult to argue against those sort of beliefs. It does concern me a great deal. So there you go. Are you back there? Oh, looks as if I might have lost Sally. I see that I've got a comment here. We have been looking for happiness to come from the outside into us, and that is what is killing the planet. If we look for happiness from within us, then we take care of the planet. Yeah, that's my opinion, Stuart Aken, and you may not agree with it. I can understand exactly where you're coming from. Is it Vivekananda? I know exactly where you are coming from. Yes, we have sacrificed our spirituality for religion, and religion really is all about dogma and rules and control, whereas spirituality is about, as you say, seeking happiness within us and seeking our contentment from within our own beings. And it's very sad that those who wish to control us are the ones who are largely in control at the present moment. Most people who want to be controllers are sociopaths. That goes for the majority of people who are in charge of big business and majority of politicians, I'm afraid. So, are you back with me now, Sally? You appear to be sort of moving slightly, but I'm not hearing anything from you. So I'll continue to talk. What else can I tell you? Got another 10 minutes to go. And where shall we go to? Just bear with me 1 second. There is a problem with this particular system. It seems that it can somehow hang. Oh, it looks as if I've lost Sally completely. I imagine that I am still online and live, so I'll continue to try to fill the moments. I feel a bit like poor old Frasier did on his radio show when he lost the script, or when he was asked to step in for somebody on at short notice. Oh, it looks as if Sally might be coming back again shortly, with a bit of luck. I suppose I should really have had something here that I could read to you. And I can see if I can find something. Just bear with me 2 seconds. What have I done with my books? Sorry, I don't want to give you dead air. I can't find any of my books.
So I'm back, and I think we're having some intermittent problems here.
I was just trying to find something I could read out to people. But you're back.
Can you hear me now, Stuart?
I can indeed.
Yeah, I had to go out and come in again. I don't know. It looked fine, but you couldn't hear me.
No.
We are getting near the end of our time, and I so appreciate your giving us your insight, your opinions, the ways that you see the world. And the one thing I wanted to challenge that you couldn't hear me saying after Vivekananda gave his comment is that I don't know that it's really complacency that people are facing at this point, but more denial and avoidance and fear. That most people really are very aware of the comment you made about how there is too much wealth concentrated in the hands of too few people, that there's an inherent unfairness and difficulty in living in a society that's governed that way. But I don't think people are ignoring that. I think we just feel powerless and helpless about it and just have to live our lives anyway.
Yes, but you see, your sound has gone again, Sally. But the evidence when people vote is that they are, in fact, not aware of the dangers, particularly with the right wing. It's the right wing who are in support of big business the vast majority of the time. And 50% of votes in the States, for instance, go to the right wing. In this country here, we've just had a general election, and the Conservatives, who are the Tories, who are the right-wing party, have been put back in power by people who the Conservatives have absolutely no interest in at all. Couldn't care less about them, to be honest with you. Unless you're worth more than £1 million, the Tories have got nothing for you. But it doesn't stop people from voting for them, and it's because they don't really think about what they're doing. They vote because that's the way their parents voted, or because that's the way they've been told to vote. And it's that sort of ignorance and complacency that worries me a great deal.
Well, I think you're right. I think those are some big issues. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay, so we have to end in a few minutes, and I want to make sure you tell people how to reach you and where you're going to be and what you're doing in the near future. So go ahead and give us your website.
Okay, you can find me as Stuart Aken, that's STUARTAKEN .net. That's my website, and all my connections and news are given on there. In fact, if you Google Stuart Aken, I am at the present moment unique, and all references probably will be to me.
Great. And Vivekananda wanted to give this one final comment about what you were saying earlier, which is that he agrees with you completely, and he thinks spirituality is what you're both talking about.
Yeah.
That you're both recognizing the importance of that, and the comment tracker seems not to be working. So I read it out loud, and you can't see it on the screen, but that's what he said. Yeah. And I want to thank you for putting up with the echo, everybody, and with the back and forthness of the sound not working and all kinds of other strangeness that went on today. And thank you, Google, for screwing up yet again a very good interface. I hope you fix it. They did an update in the last 2 days that seems to have really messed up a lot of things. So hopefully they'll get enough people complaining and they'll go and fix it and not make it worse. In the meantime, I want to thank you, Stuart, for being my guest today on Changes, episode 33. And it will be available for anyone who missed it. If you're watching later and not live, thank you for watching. Anytime you're watching, you may leave a comment on YouTube or the event page on Google, or contact Stuart or me via our website. My website is sallyember.com, SALLYEMBER.com. I'm also aware of the echo problem, and Vivekananda told me, so David also did, David Leopold, that I need to get a headset, even though I don't think the echo is happening on my side. And I need to get all my guests to wear a headset. So I need some help to pay for that and pay for my next book covers and help me fund some of the things that I haven't been able to do lately because of my concussion accident that I had over a year ago. I haven't been able to work that much, and my books still aren't selling like hotcakes. So anyone who wants to contribute, anything as low as $4 gets you a free book, and anything above that will get you some very discounted editing and proofreading and even writing tutoring services from me on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/SallyEmber. You even get to see me singing a song about my situation, which is entertaining, if not elegant. And I want to mention, too, that we're having no show next week because I'll be traveling to visit some family in Los Angeles. And then on the week of January 24th, that Wednesday, we are going to welcome David F. Leopold, who is the founder of Dreaming with Entrepreneurs and the co-creator of an incredibly interesting format called a video ebook on a lot of different topics related to small business and entrepreneurship, if that's a word. So that's who's going to be on June 24th. And what I would really like to do right now is thank everyone and anyone who's listening now and later, and ask you, Stuart, if you have any thank yous you'd like to make.
No, I'd just like to say thank you to all the listeners, and particularly thank you to you, Sally, for this opportunity. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
You are welcome, and I am very pleased that we were managing to keep this without having it totally crash. So that's my great goal, and we achieved it. I want to tell everybody this week and every week, go well with your changes, and we are signing off.
Thank you. Bye-bye.